Okay, my name is Simon Myers. I'm the founder of a charity called Gasworks Dock Partnership, which was set up specifically to regenerate the site we're in, Cody Dock. It's a project that it's been in development for about 5 years, where we've been negotiating a 999-year lease on the property, and it was set up specifically to regenerate this site and provide somewhere where local people could play an active role in the wider regeneration that's happening in the area. Cody Dock is a former dock that was used for bringing in all of the coal for the enormous gasworks that was based here. It's a very interesting site, and it's able to tell really the story of Newham. One of the reasons why industry set up here was because you didn't need a permit on this side of the River Lee, and you had an extraordinary array of businesses that set up, including the largest shipbuilding centre in the south of England, Thames Iron Works. Many people will know about Thames Iron Works perhaps because of the West Ham football team, whose nickname are the Hammers. They were made up of workers from the Thames Iron Works. There was a good 50,000 people employed in shipbuilding and iron producing related industries in this area, and they produced much of the iron that was used for Brunel's bridges and tunnels. And then beside that we had the gasworks, which was located here. Another 50,000 people working related to this site. The chap who set this site up was a guy called Harper 12 Trees. So he set up an enormous gasworks, and there were all sorts of other products that were produced here, including Prussian blue, the pigment. So lots of dyes and pigments and soaps. And one of the largest byproducts from gas production in those days was the coke, the byproduct from burning off the coal. The dock was pivotal, obviously, for getting all of the coal into the area, but then getting all these byproducts out. And the River Lee was pivotal to Newham really coming into existence, because that was the artery that was used. Very few people in the local area know about any of the amazing history that took place. And all of the entrepreneurs that set up business here, including the Stephenson's son and father, who developed the rocket. They had their coach works around the corner. You had people like Buffalo Bill, Wild Buffalo Bill, set up his camp here for when he brought his circus from America to entertain people in the area, hence the dock being named after him, Cody Dock. Another fascinating thing about Newham is that it really can be called the Waterways borough of the country. It has more waterways than Venice. We have the Roding that runs along its east boundary. On its southern boundary we have the Thames that obviously most people are familiar with, and then we have the Lee that we're based on its western boundary. You then have the largest docks in the world, the Royal Docks. You also have all the backwaters that run through the Olympic Park. So if you put all those together, you have more waterways than Venice, and more footpaths than anywhere else, any other borough in London. But despite that, when we interviewed 1,000 people locally within 4 minutes walk of the River Lee, 800 did not even know what the Lee was or where it was. We invited a local school named after the Lee, East Lee School. 80 of its pupils, 14 years old, when they came here, and I stood with my back to the Lee and said, okay, hands up, who knows what the Lee is? Not one child was able to say what the Lee is. Not one of those children had ever been to the Lee, despite the fact that we have footpaths with access to green space, car-free green space, where you can watch kingfishers fishing, cormorants and herons, all sorts of wildlife. And actually there is a 27-mile long footpath that runs from our gates all the way up to Hertfordshire, passing through 4 wildlife reserves and parks, going right the way through the Olympic Park, all the way out to Waltham Abbey, up to Hertfordshire. So we felt that by unlocking Cody Dock, people could have access to this green space, they could rediscover their waterways, and by having an approach that's geared to the general public being involved in the landscaping and the planting and the decision making on what activities take place here, there was a real opportunity for people to have a sense of ownership of the wider regeneration that's taking place. One of the other things about this site that we discovered when we first got here is that because these brownfield sites, of which there are many in the area, have been left derelict for so long, your pioneer plants have started to come in, and actually quite sophisticated wildlife habitats have developed in the area. So one of the first things that we did was do an audit of the wildlife that exists here, and we discovered that there was a very rich population, varied population of insects, which in turn was supporting over 35 different species of bird on the site. And so we felt it was very important that rather than just scratching back all of the foliage and digging back all the weeds all at once, it was important that we created little land bridges for those animals to continue to exist here. So we're doing a phased approach with our development, and as we take away things, we're actually putting wildlife habitat back in as we go. And part of that process is involving constructing a new wetland wildlife habitat and reed bed system at the end of the dock, but we're also creating habitat wildlife strips of plants and berries and nut producing plants as well. So phase 1, we're getting the site ready to basically open up and create new public access. But beyond that, we were very keen that rather than being a charity that's constantly based on rattling the tin, it was really important that we had a sustainable business model. So in addition to the charity, we have a social enterprise trading arm that's specifically there to nurture businesses on the site that will enable us to become self-sustaining over the next 2 years. And we simply responded to the site's assets and came up with a string of about 8 core businesses that could take place here. The first one is we have a derelict dock, which essentially, if we service it and we reopen it, can provide space, much needed space for live-work moorings. Currently there are about 3,000 liveaboard boats in London, and that figure is going up all the time, and there's on average a 6-year waiting list for moorings in London. So there's a real pressure on providing new spaces for liveaboard boats. Typically a liveaboard boat in London of 30 metres can be paying anything between £500 and £900 a month. Okay, so typically a boat needs to be taken out of the water and surveyed every 5 years. Currently there is one dry dock facility for the larger boats based in Greenwich, which is often booked up to survey the river taxis. So residential boats are being taken all the way down to the Medway at vast expense. So we felt that there was a real argument, a commercial argument, to build a dry dock facility that can maintain the boats that are actually residential here, but also many of the other boats that are based in London. And another enterprise that we're going to be setting up here are artist studios. London has typically had artist studios spring up in any area where there is regeneration taking place. The artists are kind of the pioneers that go into dilapidated areas, often places that are quite interesting and edgy, often the cheaper places in London. And as a result, as the regeneration has taken hold in places like St Catherine's Dock, 40 years ago, when that was derelict, artists moved in there. People like Bridget Riley and Pete Townsend, Henry Moore had studios there. Obviously, as the place became more desirable, they moved out. They moved to places like Shoreditch, and then of course the same regeneration cycle happened there, and then they moved to Hackney, and they moved to places like Carpenter's Road, where the Olympic site is now. And as that regeneration kicked in, they found that harder and harder to find studio space within East London, and are moving out as far as Barking and places like that. So, as I said, a lot of the work that we want to do down here is supposed to be done by local people, and that can be anybody. That doesn't just mean local schools and the local lollipop lady or residents in the area, but also local businesses and also the corporates. You know, we're only 8 minutes away from Canary Wharf. So over the past year, in year one, we had to clear over £2 million worth of waste that had been dumped on the site over the last 20 years, and we had up to 700, I think, volunteers come in year one. We had a further 600 volunteers come in for year two, where we have started to build planters for establishing wildlife habitats and growing spaces. We've started to build workshop spaces, and that process will be ongoing, and we're working in partnership with a number of universities and local architects and trying to come up with designs that, as we call it, are consisting of accessible architecture. So building systems that lay people who are not necessarily skilled when they come and join us can actually get stuck in with the transformation of this site. People can actually check into our Facebook page and find out about volunteer days, which are open for anyone to come and join us, or they can approach us as groups, and we can actually put a package of volunteer days together. And we do corporate team building exercises, we do volunteer days just for local community groups that want to get stuck in.